Hi, everybody. We are going to get started now with our socially distanced SmartSeat webinar. So a quick overview of the agenda. We are going to spend the beginning here introducing the concept of socially distanced SmartSeat, some introductions from our team. We will then jump into the socially distanced SmartSeat options. We'll wrap it up with timing and costs, and then if anyone has any questions, we will probably have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So with that, we'll start with some introductions here on the Adage side. I'll kick us off. I am Sarah Bordson, the VP of Strategic Growth at Adage. My colleague Heather Scholl and I work with you as your client consultants. So for SmartSeat updates, we help set up initial contracts and check in from time to time during the install and post-launch. And with that, I will hand it off to Ian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Su. I am the product architect here at Adage, which means I work with you to understand your box office setup and business requirements regarding ticket sales. And so I'm also in charge of making sure SmartSeat's feature set is complete and work with your Adage development team to make sure SmartSeat is configured and customized to your organizational needs.
All right, and hi everybody. I am Jeremy Fry. I am the new product specialist here at Adage, and my role here is I get to work with you to kick off all of your smart feature installations. I'm also here to work with you to address any questions that you may have, both in this session and once you're implementing the SmartSeat or socially distanced SmartSeat features. I will also work with you to lead some training sessions or any training sessions that you're going to need. And then I also work with Ian and the product team for delivering the timelines for installations, as well as upgrades and any sort of product roadmap updates that are going to happen related to SmartSeat. So it's nice to have everyone join us today. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here by answering the question, what is SDSS, or the acronym SDSS actually? And for us, it basically means socially distanced SmartSeat. And what is it? It's basically our two-option solution that we can present to you for helping you as an organization open safely by socially distancing the ticket purchases in your venues via SmartSeat. And what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about two different options. As I said, we've got two options available, so we're going to go through both of those a little bit here with some high-level overviews. And then when I get through those portions, I'm going to turn things over to Ian for examples of each one of the two different types. So we're going to start out by talking about the pod seating approach. So if we look at the next slide here, you can see that we basically say that the pod seating approach is pre-configured by the organization. So you guys manually adding what we're calling spacer seats to maintain social distance in a venue. And when we say spacer seats, testator vernacular for that really is just a hold code. Okay, and the way that works is you can determine what hold code type you want to use. You can build a new and specific hold code type just for COVID seating. And what you'll do is you'll go through your venue on a show-by-show basis, or by a production basis using Season Manager, however you wanted to do it, and place holds on the seats where you don't want patrons to sit. And so by doing so, as you space those holds out, the seats that are not held are basically creating a pod. So what you're going to do is you're going to create pods of 1 seat for folks who would want to attend on their own, pods of 2 seats or 3 seats or 4 seats, kind of depending on how many different combinations of quantities you want to put together. And those pods work on a left to right basis. So as long as they're in the same logical seat row, if they don't have holds on them, they are considered a pod at that point. Okay, and so as I said, you're going to go ahead and evaluate your individual shows. You're going to determine what sorts of combinations that you need in terms of your 1s, your 2s, 3s, 4s, so on and so forth. And you're going to go ahead and create those pods throughout the facility on that given show or that event. Okay. We think that this option offers you ultimate flexibility in terms of where you place your folks. This is also the best of the two options if in your theater itself, you want to physically mark off given seats. So if you're putting either bags on them to note people are not sitting here, or you're kind of using some sort of tape or other visible designation to say folks are not supposed to sit in these seats, having those seats predetermined works best with this pod option. With the pod option, we have 3 different configuration setups for that. It can be set up on a facility basis. It can be set up by a production or production season basis, or it can be set up down at the individual performance level. And Ian will talk a little bit more about that during his portion. All right, so that's the pod option there. The second option that we have is what we're calling the dynamic approach, okay, or the dynamic seating approach. And basically during this seat selection process, the dynamic socially distanced SmartSeat will automatically add those spacer seats or hold codes to maintain that social distancing in a venue. So how does that work? This gives greater flexibility on the patron side because you have not predetermined what seats are available. And so it works in combination with your best seating and your logical seat rows. When someone selects a seat and fully carts the seat online, what happens is that this socially distant smart seat kicks in. It looks at the rules that you have set up for how much of a perimeter you want to have around that seat. And there's a couple different options for that perimeter. You can do it on a radius basis, right? So basically in a circle around the seat or seats that they've selected, how many seats need to be killed off or held for a social distance smart seat. That radius is done on a pixel sort of basis. Again, Ian will go into this a little bit more when he shows this in his example. And it uses your SVG to actually determine what that seating radius is going to look like, okay? The other way that it can be achieved is by when a seat or a group of seats are selected and carted, it will actually put holds or kill holds to the left or to the right of to the left and right of their selection based on how many seats you want that to go. Likewise, so basically if you think of the Tessitura seat grid as an XY axis, all the seat locations actually do have an XY coordinate, each individual seat. And so the left to right is determined by increasing or decreasing the number on the x-axis. And then you can also determine front to back. If you want to go ahead and create space between the rows, you can do that by increasing or decreasing the number on the y-axis on the seat or in the configuration as well. So not only can you have social distance to the left and right, you can also have it front to back by making those adjustments. Okay, so it can be one or the other, or you can do both the X and the Y together, which will create the maximum sort of spacing between those seats that you'd be looking for. And any of those configuration options, the radius, the X, the Y, or the X and the Y, basically the greater the number that you do in any of those options, the greater the distance that will automatically be applied when those seats are actually carted. The benefit to this approach is that it actually translates back into the application so that as people are transacting online, the box office will also see those holds in place. And as the box office is selling seats, it will put those holds on automatically for the staff so they don't have to remember that since I sold seat 1, 2, and 3, that I need to put holds on seats 4, 5, and 6. It will happen based on the rules that you set up when you actually get this configuration in place. So those are the two approaches, the pod approach and the dynamic approach. And now I want to go ahead and turn things over to Ian so that we can see what this looks like in real time here.
All right, so what we see here, give me a second. Great, so what the first example we're going to see is an example of us setting up pod seating in our Tessitura. So you can see here, we've broken out the seats. So we place holds on seats in the row so that we've kind of partitioned it out so that we have pairs of seats, groups of 4, groups of 3, single seats. So this is something where we'd expect your box office team to provide the facility map updates like so. And what SmartSeat will go ahead and do is you can see here that as we are adding seats to inside a pod, we will have a message and not allow you to check out until you completed everything in your pod. So this error message, so you can see here, once we are there, we can continue this. We can continue with the. Give me 1 second. The webinar controls are not where I want them to be. Great. So don't actually want to show VIP tickets because ticketing is being here. Give me 1 second. Okay. So you look here. our standard seats. You'll see this again, where we will force you to put in seats and everything in the pod. And this message is configurable. So you can choose to say which seat is a problem, or you can just put a more generic text that says, please reserve everything in the pod. So that's configurable in Vini Builder itself. And then once you completed putting everything in your pod, you'll be able to check out like so. So that's the pod approach. And then the socially distanced, the dynamic approach, I will show here. Once we enable it, let's start with getting setting this radius to be 0. So we'll save this. And then a note on what Jeremy said, we will have a safety net for your box office, but it won't happen until the next time somebody loads SmartSeat. So it won't we don't have a way to automatically put the holds when you transact using the client. It just will make sure the next time a patron gets to SmartSeat, we will update the hold codes. So if we're in it's a safety net just in case someone forgets, but ideally with the dynamic approach, both your box office and SmartSeat following the same rules would still be preferred. So when we set it to 0 at first, I can show you what the seat map looks like with everything, with all the seats available. So when we load up SmartSeat here, you'll see that here are, these are all of the available seats. So this is with no seat holds or dynamic holds. You can see these seats are open. But then when I say I want to start dynamically reducing the seats based on the radius, so like Jeremy described, you can decrease and increase the radius size to block off more seats. The idea of the radius is supposed to be more true to kind of the 6 feet rule, and ultimately as restrictions go down, or maybe we bring it down to 3 feet and stuff like that, that is stuff where we can start bringing the radius down. So I'll just put in 75 for now, and when I clear my cache and reload the map, you'll start seeing seats being blocked off dynamically. So you'll see those seats up here that used to be available are no longer available because these seats were reserved by somebody else. You can see here in the legend, we placed an icon on it. This is something we can put on the pod seating as well. So it makes it so that we can show your patrons that you guys are taking steps to be safe and socially distanced and things like that. So it's a nice example of you guys, taking the safety into account. So yeah, that's for the most part high level how it works. Like Jeremy said, we have a couple of different options, one being the SVG radius, one being the tessitura, kind of the grid, and we taking the radius of the XY axis, or saying I want to kill seats to the left and right using the X axis, or in the previous or next row using the Y axis. And then, yeah, I think the last thing we wanted to kind of just touch on was being able to, for the pod seating, this is to be able to enable it. What SmartSeat out of the box works is we can turn it on and off for SmartSeat in general. So meaning if you only use SmartSeat to sell pod seating, we can just turn it on. But then if you start getting into a point where your organization wants to sell both seated and, pod, socially distanced and not socially distanced performances using SmartSeat, that's when we would like to have a conversation with you and your project team about how you would like to configure it. That's where the most common ones we've seen are on this facility level. So for this facility, we want to enable pod seating, or for this production or production season, we want to enable pod seating, or for this specific performance. Or if you guys have other custom rules or utilize the store procedure, we just want to confirm what those business rules are and then provide you an estimate on top of enabling pod seating. With that, I will turn it back over to Sarah and she can kind of wrap up.
Great, thank you both so much, Ian and Jeremy. I'm just going to take back over screen control here. Okay, so taking a look at pricing and timing. For the pod option, there's a one-time licensing fee of $1,000. And then the configuration, as Ian just mentioned, based on which type of setup you use, the facility or production season is about the same at 1 to 2 hours, where the by performance, the ability to set up your different pods that way is, or the use of the pod seating by performance is a little bit more involved at 2 to 4 hours. We do ask for about 1 to 2 weeks to work on this together, to get it installed, configure it, do any testing with you, and then deploy it with your Adage team. It does require being on the most recent version of SmartSeat. So what you would want to do is schedule an upgrade to SmartSeat first, and then we would also set up the pod option at that time. Similarly, the dynamic option, very similar in its pricing and timing, in that it is also a one-time $1,000 licensing fee to use the dynamic option. This one takes about 3 to 5 hours to configure, and then the timeline similarly is about 1 to 2 weeks, and it does require as well the most recent version of SmartSeat. One thing to note about the dynamic option is that we are currently retooling part of the solution. So we need about 2 to 4 weeks to finalize our updates internally at Adage before then we would be able to do that 1 to 2 weeks to get that set up for you. And so with that, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and submit those to the chat. So the question is, with the pod seating on the performance level, how easy is it to adjust your pods?
It's as simple as any sort of other hold adjustment that you would do. So say if you were adjusting your production holds or your artistic holds or any other sort of holds that you'd be doing at that point, it really works the same. So as you need to update any sort of pod settings, as you either expire a hold or add additional ones, SmartSeat will actually pick up the changes that you've made there to that.
So then Mark, it looks like, asked a follow-up of if it's easy on the production level too.
Yes, yeah, so the same sort of simplicity there. So of course, from a production perspective, if you make your hold adjustments in Season Manager via a production instead, yeah, it's going to be the same as if you did it on a per performance basis.
Okay. Next question, is the version requirement for both SmartSeat and Venue Builder? So do you need to be on the most recent version of both of those?
Yeah, generally, general rule of thumb is when we upgrade SmartSeat, we upgrade both Venue Builder and SmartSeat. It usually doesn't work when we only upgrade one or the other. So, but with Venue Builder upgrades, data will never be touched or changed. So it should be a relatively smooth upgrade.
Okay, we had another question come in. Great. So can one switch between pod and dynamic? So can you have them both and choose which to assign for a particular event?
Yeah, so we want to, so the short answer is absolutely. Right now the fee kind of covers both, so enables pod like social distance features. So then we would just work with you and your project team to figure out what the criteria are. So again, whether it's on a facility level, production level, or a performance level, we can enable one or the other or both. Yeah, we just want to talk through it.
Yeah, and once you have the SDSS product in place, as rules start to lessen, and maybe the state comes to you and says, hey, you can actually go full 100% capacity, you can then just turn it off for your shows, and it's kind of still hanging out there. If something would change, you need to turn it back on, but it's really kind of a fairly simple switch and a fairly simple use. Once you have it, use it or don't use it.
All right, great. Well, thank you all again. As I'm wrapping it up right now, if anyone has any other questions, shoot them in there. But thank you all again so much for your time. It was great to see you here. And if you do have any follow-up, additional or organizational specific questions, you can absolutely reach out to us at the smartseat@adagetech.com email, and we'll be able to get back to you with those shortly. Bye.
Bye, all.